Hey everyone. Wow, do I have a show for you today. Welcome to Above, Down, Inside, Out. I am your host, Dr. Natasha Nelson. So here is my question for you today and what we will be discussing, which is the concept of discipline. Is it harmful? Is it helpful? What's the impact and the real cost of discipline? Now, I think about that a lot. Think about the role that it plays in my life now, the role that it played, and as a parent, finding that balance of how much discipline and what to teach. And I think back to the beginning of how it started for me, and that was in high school, and a little bit in middle school, but really high school. And I loved my high school experience. I had a great high school experience. I went to a small private school, and it was such a welcoming and safe environment. And it was completely different from the chaos of my childhood and how I grew up. And by the time we got to high school, we had moved cities, we had a new neighborhood, new friends, everything was new. And it was an opportunity for me to start over. And with my mom, we started over. And to me, that meant leave my past behind. There was no room for it. I didn't need it. I was done. Everything about my childhood and the chaos was gone, and it was done. You know, and by the time I got to high school, it was such a safe environment, and I made new friends, and the teachers were very, supportive, and the learning. And what I realized is that in my starting over, I was able to reinvent myself. And it's as if everything prior to didn't exist for me. And so I really became really focused, and I was playing sports. I played every sport because that's what you do. You play every season, every sport. I was so focused on grades and academics because I finally had a vision of college. And so, it's like I had this to-do list of my life, which was like sports, and I was like, check. And schoolwork and academics, check. And great friends and a social life, check. I even had a part-time job, check. What I developed was discipline, check. Probably by my, sophomore year, I was in charge. I was determined, I was in charge, I was in control, and it really was the chance for me to feel like, wow, I am in control of my life. And by then I was like, I'm a typical high school student. I looked like, everything was fine. I was well adjusted, just kind of like regular teen, doing regular teen stuff. I even had a disciplined way of breaking the rules. Right? I laugh at it now because I hope you're smiling if you're listening to this, laughing with me. But really I didn't know it at the time. It's only now when I go back in retrospect that I see how with the new school and the new city and new environment, I really could leave my past behind. And I could move forward as if my childhood didn't exist. The childhood pain didn't exist. I felt free, and I was really free to reinvent myself. I loved that I could start over. I pretended that it's almost like I didn't even exist. Everything in my childhood, nothing happened. It didn't exist. I didn't talk about it. I didn't share it. I shared in another episode that I didn't even see my dad, and if people asked, I would just be like, he's gone. And if they thought that he died, I didn't really correct them. I was just like, yeah, he's gone. I was so focused on where I was going and the direction I was going, and I loved what I was creating for my life. And what I loved was being busy. I was a busy, busy, busy body, doing everything, filling my schedule, no time for anything else. I loved having a schedule. I loved the discipline of it. I really loved having the rewards that comes with being disciplined. But what I really, really, really loved was being so incredibly busy that there was just no room for anything else. No room for feelings, no room for sadness, no room for anything other than where I was going. And so go, 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 do, make shit happen. I was taking control of my life, and no matter what, I didn't want anything to interfere with that because that was a happy place for me. It was the new and improved me, the new version of me, the kind of kick-ass, strong, just loving this part of me. I would get things done, and I loved the way it felt. So really, that was where high school taught me how to be very disciplined. And I thrived with the discipline. What it did is it gave me a new operating system that I could trust and I could rely on. I realized, well, as long as I had a plan, had action steps, take charge, do it, and not feel anything, then I could accomplish anything that I wanted to do. And this is where this budding part of my personality, a little bit of a hard-ass disciplinarian, but I did it with like a dazzling smile, and I could smile and make everything look really easy. And I made it look effortless because that's what I was taught. Look like a duck so that you just glide on the surface of the lake and nobody sees how hard your feet are paddling underwater. So that was my mom's, the Nelson motto, be like a duck. And what I loved is that when there was no room for any feelings or anything else, all the rest of me was just a secret that nobody needed to know about. And that was an old part of me that I didn't have to deal with in any way. Because through high school, I was happy. I really was. Like, I loved it. I was mostly happy. Like, I felt that way. Genuinely felt good. And just wouldn't change it. I was genuine in myself and that part of myself. But I also recognized, I didn't really know how to understand it at the time, that I was creating this mask that was separating me and creating this new version of me. While it was real, it was also becoming a fine-tuned mask that what I couldn't see was what was happening to me below the surface. Because what I couldn't see is that self-imposed, like rigid disciplinarian style was also hardening my heart. And what I didn't know at the time was that hardening of my heart was compromising my health. But I didn't know it, I didn't feel it, and there was no way for me to predict what was being planted at the time. Because really, I loved this version of me. And I loved that I found a way and found something in me where I was no longer that sad and broken and insecure and vulnerable little girl that got just beat up physically, emotionally, verbally, all of it. That part was my previous life. I hated that little girl in me. I hated how weak she was. I hated that she was abused. I hated her. And I vowed to never, ever, ever allow her to exist. And this new version of me, the hard disciplinarian and structured, she was amazing. And she was able to take over and make sure that the weak little girl in me was nowhere to be found. You know, I think about that and I just, wow. So I think about it, I hope that as I'm sharing that there's a part of you that you might relate, you might recognize something in you that's similar to my story. Because what I valued most about the disciplinarian in me, I realize now there's just no room for those pesky emotions and those irritating thoughts and the parts of the past that had no function. They were useless. That little girl, oh, she was useless. There was no room for her, and I didn't like her anyways, and we would never be friends. And I pushed her so far deep into this high achieving suit that I was wearing with the perfectly, donned mask of happy, mostly all the time. I could look that way. And that's what I wanted people to see and know, and that was it. So what could possibly go wrong? Oh, I can hear you smiling because I'm smiling as I recognize so much, like, it's just naive, right? But does it sound familiar to you? So this is going back to how I started today's episode, which is, does discipline help or harm? Well, both is what I think the answer is, just not simultaneously observable. Because have you ever felt too busy to feel anything? And I don't mean in a day or even a week, but months and years. Have you created a schedule that's just so full that there's no room to feel, there's no space, there's no time? It's very forward facing and it's rigid and it's practical and logical and just determined in the direction towards your goal and where you're going. Do you find yourself so busy that you can avoid and distract yourself from anything that's uncomfortable? And even better, just not have any emotions at all. It's like very robotic. Why bother with feelings? They just get in the way and they interrupt and they cost too much and they're yucky and icky and nobody likes them. So, good riddance. But what would happen? Here's my question for you. What would happen if you couldn't live up to the schedule you created? If you couldn't continue going from one obligation to another and from one demand to another, what would you feel if you had to stop everything? I'm going to pause just for a second because I can almost hear you rolling your eyes and doing that little like, whatever. As if you're like, yeah, that wouldn't happen. Because you wouldn't let it happen. Because the disciplinarian in you would be like, I'm not letting that happen. That's okay. I've been there too. But what if Like, what would happen if one day you were just forced to sit in silence and nowhere to go, with no plans and nothing to work on and no projects to take next action steps on? And not like a vacation, just nowhere to go and nothing to do. What discomfort would you feel, especially related to events or circumstances or situations from your past that you didn't want to really ever have to deal with? So like I said, discipline worked for me, and I was rewarded well for my, high performance and stoic and hyper independent way of operating. I liked it. I was consumed with the details and perfection and this constant need to fill every waking moment with something to succeed. But really, it's because I loved that I was in control. It was the exact opposite of how I felt for the first 12 years of my life, where I felt powerless, I felt weak, insecure, and I felt beyond vulnerable. I felt like I was an easy target and I'd be easily preyed on and abused, and I didn't want that. So discipline allowed me to feel powerful and in control. And that discipline became like a warrior suit and protective suit for me. And it served me so well. And to this day, there are parts of me where discipline is part of the core values that I operate with. I structure it differently now, though. Because what I realized is back then in high school, that disciplinarian style was intended to drown out and suffocate that vulnerable and weak little girl in me that I didn't like. So this is where I'm asking you, like, what rules have you set up in an attempt to control your world? In an attempt to feel in control in your world and in your life that feels out of control? What rules and disciplinarian, it's a style, but it's the rules that have become a set of standards that you operate by with no flexibility. Because have you ever really considered like how and why those rules have come to be in your life? Because inherently they're not right or wrong, and they're not good or bad. But have you really thought about, well, why do you have this rule for yourself? Because when I started to really have to look at this for myself, that's when I started to realize all of these rules I had put in place to help me feel safe, help me feel secure, help me feel in control. They helped me manage or survive, and they were put in place for feeling like in my childhood I didn't know how to survive. And this is where, only you really, really know. And that's the deep and honest work of how to, it's not reinventing your life. It's not reinventing you. It's really taking honest inventory of what works and what doesn't, but what's true and honest, what's authentic and what's no longer working, and when it's time to let something go. Because in the end, it's really about how much energy is that disciplinarian system costing you. Like how much of your life force energy is being sucked out of you by maintaining these rules, by forcing yourself to keep this schedule, keep the rules. really the attempt to stay in control, it requires a lot of energy to force down, whether it's your childhood, like it was for me, to force that part of me out, to force that little girl in me away. It's a lot of energy to do that. And it took decades, but it led to burnout because there was so much energy required to hide, to wear that warrior suit, to be the protector of myself, to survive, to be the disciplinarian. There was a high price and a high cost. And I want you to think about that for yourself. What is your operating system costing you? So here are some questions to think about for yourself. If you were to stop and do nothing, maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe longer, could you find peace in that? Would you feel at peace doing nothing? Now that's different from having nothing to do. I'll let you think on that. How much energy, how much effort is it costing you to keep going with this hard set of rules and schedule that you have to do, have to live, have to? But how much energy is it costing you to suppress and ignore how you feel and how you feel about the things in your past that you didn't like? How much energy is it costing you to run away and pretend as if your past didn't exist? Who are you running away from? And why are you fighting so hard to run away? Is your disciplinarian style, is that operating system in you allowing you to have any creative flexibility? Is it allowing you to just go with the flow when change happens? Or is it so rigid that when change happens, you are sent into a bit of anxiety, almost panic, and your internal system is just like, not having it because your control mechanism is being challenged. So I want you to think about your operating system, how and where that set of rules and the disciplinarian in you is so intense and so rigid that it's costing you more than you think that it's costing, and at some point the rewards of that style is no longer really offering the same amount of reward. So it's a little bit of just a cost balance analysis in your life about the energy that it takes. So I hope today's episode was really designed to get you to think about what it means to have discipline, to be disciplined, to force discipline if it's not working, to reevaluate your disciplinarian style to see what's working and what's not and what you can let go of. And if you can't let go of it, why not? Because there's something deeper for you to pay attention to. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you had some type of aha moment or something that gives you a little bit of like let me think about that. Because that's what's going to help you start to reclaim the energy that you have been losing that is affecting your health in some way. So that's all today. I am Dr. Natasha Nelson. Thank you for listening to Above, Down, Inside Out. And if you could do me a favor and talk about the episode, leave me a question or a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Whether you liked it or hated it, or if anything resonated with you, I want to hear from you. So thank you, and I'll talk with you next time. Bye.